It's Song Talk Radio.
Good evening, good afternoon, or good day, depending on when you happen to be listening to us. Welcome back to the show, folks. This is the show called Song Talk Radio. And if you happen to be new to all this, this is the show where we talk about songwriting. Basically, we all share tips and tricks and things we've figured out along the way. And in the end, hopefully, we all learn at least 3 new things on how to write better songs each and every show. I'm your host tonight, Phil Emery, and my usual partner in crime, Neil Modi. He is on assignment in Bulgaria, so I'm going to both be pressing the buttons and doing the talking, which sometimes is not the best idea. Before we get started, a couple of things. One, we are still taking entries into the contest to win Joey Coffone's book on creativity, Laws of Creativity, Unlock Your Originality, and Awaken Your Creative Genius. To win, all you have to do is just send us an email to feedback@songtalk.ca with how you deal with creativity or something along those lines, and we'll enter you into the contest to win a free copy of the book. That's feedback@songtalk.ca, and it's actually a really good book. So if you even if you don't win, I think you should actually go out and buy it because it's a really good book. And if you don't win it, just go to your local book seller, and I'm sure they'll be happy to fix you up with a copy. The upcoming songwriting challenge will have something to do with modes. So in the meantime, keep your ears peeled for modi type things out there on the internet. And then we're going to have a couple of shows dedicated to exploring this often misunderstood songwriting tool. Now, on to our guest. Bill Bartholomew is a singer, songwriter, musician, podcaster, radio host, and television journalist based in Providence, Rhode Island. He cut his teeth in Brooklyn's DIY scene at New York clubs like Mercury Lounge and the Knitting Factory, and touring internationally as a solo artist and a member of the band Silver Teeth, before relocating to Providence, Rhode Island. It is there that he has established himself as one of New England's top media personalities, as host of his popular Bartholomew Town podcast, TV at PBS, and on regional powerhouse talk radio station WPRO. 2022 saw him return to his roots with the release of his latest album, Beige. The Independent wrote, a pure sound quality that highlights the songwriting craft as it is being informed by an original artistic identity, an indie rock foundation with a folk and country element bouncing off it. He has been featured on NPR, Vice, Showtime, and MTV. And let's have a sample of his song now.
She's a girl, loves this world, so I turn in the valley head like that. Lonely one, lonely one.
Great song. We could just let it go all by itself, and then we wouldn't have a show. Thanks for being on the show, Bill.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me. I'm very happy to be here.
So let's talk about your songwriting process. Are you a lyrics first person, or a music first person, concept first? What is your process like?
Well, I have this, I don't know if it's a theory or concept, but it's just sort of what I kind of identify with as a songwriter, that it's not that every song is already written and you're pulling it in from, some sort of imagined or real place out there in the cosmos. But I imagine myself as sort of an antenna, and every idea is out there. And the challenge is to just get into the right headspace, the right creative space, and sort of harvest those ideas and pull them in. And for me, that's just how I've kind of worked as a songwriter, and really in any medium, as far back as I can remember. No, there are of course technical aspects to it where I'll think of different tunings, or looking at different ways of taking a lyric and making it more interesting. Obviously, that's there, but for the most part, it's based on just this notion of, all right, let's just create something. And it's inexplicable. It's mysterious. I'm so fascinated by songwriting in that sense, because you go from nothing to this musical experience that is entirely unique. And I try not to overthink in those early creative phases, especially, at this point where I'm really open to just seeing where the song takes me. I rarely go in with sort of a mentality of, I want this type of song, or I'm going for this type of vibe, or here's my prompt. In fact, I find it really difficult if someone were to give me a prompt, if they were to say, hey, write a song about, elephants or something like that. Almost certainly I would not like this song whatsoever. But if I'm just in that creative space and I go to that place, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, and put the work in, put the time in, out of the many, many ideas that will be created in that burst of energy, something or some things, typically in batches, will catch my attention and just sort of become a foundation for a song, which then goes to voice memo. And then from voice memo, after listening, it usually goes to a combination of a Pro Tool session where I play all the instruments and start to work on it from there, in addition to writing a lyric or two down as I listen back to myself and say, what did I say there? The key for me is phonetics. I start in a place of a musical progression, almost 100% of the time on guitar, very rarely on keyboard or something like that. And I'll just start singing. And there's rarely a lyric to be had in the early stages, but there's a phonetic progression that I use as a way to, it's almost a space for me to decode what it is that I'm trying to say.
Right. Yes, I think you and I work much the same way. That's how I do it. Start off with the music and just do sort of na na na, and then try to eventually eke out a song. I'm sure probably said this on the show before, but I had a song that I was working on and used to play it on my iPod on the way to work and on the way back. And I think each trip I added one word to the song. Right. But I'm really happy with it. I'm like, it's one of my best songs, I think, but it took me a long time. Now, are you writing every day, or because you do a lot of stuff? How are you getting all this stuff done?
It's wild. I don't write every day, but when I get into a period, which I'm fortunate to be in one right now, where I'm writing a lot, it's a daily occurrence. It's mixed in, and most of the time when I start the creative process, it's usually at night. I have found that that's the most fertile space for me, 8 or 9 o'clock at night, and to just pick up a guitar, hit record on a voice memo, and just work for an hour or an hour and a half or something in that space, and listen back the next day and start to decide, hey, what was a song? What was just an idea? Sometimes song ideas merge together. Sometimes something that started as a song diverges and becomes multiple songs. So I don't write every day. I don't have a super disciplined scenario where it's like, okay, it's 10 o'clock in the morning, I've got to write or whatever. I just kind of follow the energy and the instinct. And especially now that I put out a record a month and a half ago, now I'm fully focused on just doing the creative side, which is my by far favorite portion. Writing songs and performing live are my favorite things. And I just always try to have the goal of inside myself saying, are we moving forward? Do we have new material? Do we have new songs? Do we have things that are exciting happening on the music side? And if the answer is yes, then I'm pretty much satisfied with that.
Right. When you're writing your lyrics, are you thinking about things like rhyme schemes or any of that, or is it just purely organic?
I would say more so organic in I played in New York with a lot of hip hop artists when I lived in New York, which I lived there for 10 years. And a lot of my shows were with hip hop artists, or I was exposed to a lot of poets. And from there, you learn the essential nature of rhyme scheme and of using that as the driving force for rhythm. So it's definitely there for me. I care about it. I listen to it in any music, even quite frankly, even in instrumentals. There's a phraseology to it that is important to understand.
True. That's true.
But I don't generally sit there with a pad and paper, although I work on legal paper. And if you saw my wall right now behind the camera, it's covered in legal paper with like tacked up with a line or two. It almost always starts in that organic space of, let me get into the creative place. Let me just write, do the voice memo. And really what happens is I go in and make these Pro Tools demos, multi-instrument, multi-vocal take Pro Tools demos, where I'll do a vocal, the lead vocal, take one, have no lyrics or maybe 2 or 3 lines, and I'm just singing from that phonetic place, and I'll double it. And then I'll do 2 or 3 harmonies, and they don't always line up. And that's an interesting excursion to go in and say, what did I say there? And what could I say there? And, oh, that's really interesting. And I find things that I'm certain I wouldn't find if I set out intentionally to sit there and write it. It's not to dismiss. In fact, I really admire the writers that can say, hey, here's my theme. Let me write a song that's essentially poetry. But just my process has just been this organic sort of, hey, let's, like you said, on the way to work, nothing better than being in the car, putting on a voice memo of something and having that eureka moment, on some highway somewhere and going, oh, that's what I was trying to get to when I was saying whatever it was I was saying, whatever that mumbo jumbo was, it actually was meant to be this. And having a piece of lyric that you're then certain is the right piece.
It's true, because I think you can really let the song find those long vowels and find those hooks that might be hard if you start off with a lyric first. And that process certainly works for lots of people. I don't know if you've seen the Beatles movie Get Back.
Sure.
Paul McCartney worked mostly that way. And there's a part of the movie where he's actually trying to figure out Get Back, and he's just going, and that's how, and I identify with that. But one thing we did do as a song challenge, I think just the recent one, is that we wrote from a title, which is something I have done before. Have you ever done that?
I have, and there's a few examples that come to mind, but one I go back to is my friend Christopher Nod, who's a wonderful songwriter here in Rhode Island, and he and I lived in Brooklyn together as well. He had we were at some porch somewhere, like hanging out after, I think it was a band practice, and there was this kid who was for some reason telling a story about when he was in high school. There was another student who put nickels into a chicken sandwich or a hamburger or something like that, which is obviously extremely dangerous and, horrible thing to do. But the word nickels, jumped out at both of us, and we both were like, let's each, I don't even know if we said to each other, let's do this. We just both went and wrote songs called Nickels. And I've had experiences like that where the most random title will jump out at me. But usually, like I said, it's really tough for me to have an intentional pathway to a song from the get-go. I've written some podcast theme songs, which are instrumental. And it's like, very a corporate type of work, but you get a brief and it's like, here's a podcast that's going to be about the blue economy, for example, which is, ocean oriented. So now I have to go into it with a dedicated headspace, and I have to write a theme song that is, based on what do I hear in the ocean? What do I hear in technology? How can I take these ideas and put them down into some kind of quick 5 to 15-second theme.
Hmm.
And that is an enormous challenge for me. And I enjoy it, but it's not something that I would want to do every single day. And I admire those writers that can really write for other artists with that type of an approach, or write for themselves with that exact approach. But that just really isn't me in terms of how I go about things.
I have to admit, that was the first time I've ever written from a title. We've had lots of guests write from titles. It's very common in Nashville, apparently.
Yeah, it is. Yep.
Because a great title, especially in that market, seems to work really well. But I have to admit, I did wind up getting music that I don't think I would have gotten to otherwise.
Right. You're going to get an entry point. Right.
Yeah. Well, and that's one of the things we do with challenges. We're trying to push ourselves out of our comfort zone. Mm-hmm. And, not permanently, but just trying to sort of think, okay, what happens if I do this? Now, how are you approaching your song structures, especially with, the short attention spans these days? It's something I've been struggling a lot with songs, because I'm always used to like verse, chorus, bridge, verse, chorus, end, which is a really long song now, and everything's short these days. And even as an old punk, I'm struggling with song length. But how are you dealing with that these days?
Well, you had a really good episode on this show recently with the prompt, or the theme was bridges, but there was a discussion on song length, and it's really fascinating, because there's one thing that's a definite truth right now, which is that attention spans are short, except for if something is really engaging, and then you'll get people to have that TSL statistic, time spent listening, which is like a statistic that radio and podcast people obsess over. And songwriters probably not so much, although you can get those metrics on Bandcamp and Spotify and things like that. So for me, it does matter. I have been, for the last 10 years, really focused on that 320 number. But a less is more approach in general, I think, is really important. But I'm also very interested in the experimental, the full creative expression. So if a song ends up being closer to 4 minutes, and by chiseling off things, it's going to impact that creative message, I'm less concerned about it today. And I'll tell you why. I was working on a song this past weekend where I realized, I can just do a very quick 3-second sort of fade in of some noise, like take a guitar and get some feedback and the right keyboard pad, and then bam, into the verse. Like, we don't need this big setup. But why I'm less concerned about writing shorter songs right now is because of my exposure and experience with TikTok, and similarly Instagram Reels and YouTube Shorts. And on those micro video platforms where there's a huge audience, and there's people on there who will basically spend much, if not all, of their consumption time there. You as a songwriter in any given song are capable of finding a 5, 7, 10, maximum 15-second bite that can live in those spaces, that can live in the shortest of short form spaces. And to me, if someone finds, while scrolling through TikTok, comes across a 5-second bite of my song, and they're moved by it, and they find it compelling, to me, I count that as a listen. What's the difference if they listen to every song you've ever written for 4 hours or 8 hours or 20 hours, whatever it is, versus 5 seconds if they're moved by it? For me as a kid growing up listening to radio, you flip through, you catch the end of a song, you go, what was that? Oh man, I need to know what that is. Maybe you follow it up. Maybe you go buy the record at the record store. Maybe you just look for it to come up on the radio again. But if nothing else, you had that moment. You had that experience with that piece of music. So I'm less worried about like, geez, no one spends that much time with content. They keep moving along. Well, if someone wants to go to Spotify or Bandcamp or come out to a show, you might see at a show, a live show. I tend to go onto these really experimental whatever you want to call them. They're not even solos. I'll do feedback. I'll do spoken word over it. I'll pick up a megaphone. I'll add percussion, whatever the case is. Or if I'm with my band, we'll kind of jam. And then there's that version. And then there's the recorded version that's maybe 320 or 340. But then there's the TikTok version, this is all new for me. This is within this year. But what's the compelling, very short portion of the song that tells as much of the story about you as an artist and about your passion, your emotion, your soul as you can reveal in a short format? And if I can find that given bite, then I'm way less concerned about shaving off to get it as neat, quote unquote, as possible to fit the sort of standard of today, which is, like you said in that episode of your show here a couple episodes ago, people are writing short songs. It's not just in the punk context. It's like, big artists, Taylor Swift type artists, their songs are short.
Yeah, and that's an interesting thing with TikTok, to actually look at your music sort of in not just as a whole, but also small pieces. You also said something that I've always wondered about is playing live, because I was in punk bands and we used to just play the songs the way we recorded them. Mm-hmm. So that meant that you had to have like 40, 50 songs to play a night because they're all... Then I'd go off and watch other bands and they'd be having these songs really, really long. And so when you are presenting these songs live to people, how do you decide how long it should be? Because I think having something longer, I understand now, works better because it does help people get into the song more, especially if they haven't heard it.
It's, it really depends on the moment. We've had, and I have a fairly consistent live band. In some cases, we've been playing together for 20 years. And it's feeling the moment and going with it. We have when I'm playing solo, I have a very improvisational instinct. And if something feels right and there's a space and you've got a crowd engaged, why leave that? Why go, all right, we got to move on to the next song. I'd rather play a 5-song set and get into some of these. Like I said, I love when I'm playing solo now. I've sometimes I'll just stand there, no mic. I can totally do that. I've bussed in New York. I've played amazing scenarios where it's literally nothing but me and myself and a guitar. But I'm also now using a lot of my electric pedals when I play solo acoustic. And let's just stay here. Let's get into a moment of a big drone and let's dial it in. Let's keep everybody on the edge of their seat as long as we can. And then there's also a moment where it's like, all right, this is obviously just like gratifying nonsense. And sometimes it's horrifying to listen back to some of the tapes because you go, all right, that was complete nonsense. You could have been in and out of that song. So it's just a learning process and it's just feeling an audience. And when it's full band, or when it's with the band I played with for many years that is now on hiatus, Silverteeth, with my partner, Gabriella Rossi, sometimes we would just we had songs that just ended out of nowhere. These are regular quote unquote songs that just turned into noise with the drummer kind of shredding and just us really giving it experimental noise. And it's almost like, how much can the crowd stand before we, and before we become unwelcome here? And that test is a really interesting one as well. So it's always just figuring what does this moment call for? What would I want to see if I was in the crowd right now? And it doesn't always need to be, in my opinion, technically really great. And there's this, I know you're Canadian, so, or at least recording in Canadian, and you certainly sound the Canadian, so, which is a high praise in the songwriting world.
That's a boot, right?
Exactly. But there's a Canadian band. I don't know if you're familiar with them, Blue Rodeo.
Of course.
So when I was in high school, there's this show, it's still on, it's called Austin City Limits. It's on PBS. And I was, scrolling through, and I was into like alternative rock and punk and indie and classic rock, things like this. But I'm scrolling through and I just got into like the Jayhawks and the alt country songwritery stuff. But I came across on Austin City Limits, this band. I was like, what is this? This is amazing. and it was Blue Rodeo. And what engaged me so much was the songwriting, the pair of songwriters, Jim Cuddy and Greg Keeler, but then the guitar playing, the experimental aspect of it. And Greg Keeler and Jim Cuddy, I wouldn't say that they're like amazing quote unquote musicians, but Greg Keeler played the best guitar solo that I've ever seen live in my life, hands down. And when I saw Blue Rodeo one of many times in 2002 at the House of Blues in Boston on the outro of a song called 5 Days in May. And it made me, and that song, you know, the record version is actually pretty long. It's probably like 4.5 minutes. That was like a 10-minute version of that song. And it could have gone on longer. And it was just shredding, noise, reverb. I mean, the guy left, it's like an athlete that leaves nothing on the field. And that was a seminal moment for me to realize that's what I want to be. I want to just be someone who can express and find tools to express what's inside of me. And the Blue Rodeo was just like such an important band to me.
One of the things I loved about Blue Rodeo is they have two songwriters that have, it's fairly rare, two songwriters to have compatible yet different styles. Like
Yes.
you always knew whose song was who, but they still sounded like Blue Rodeo, which I think can be a real challenge. And they still work together for a long time because very often two strong personalities like that would clash, but they seem to have made it work.
And one healthy thing about them, besides the bond of their backstory, which, you know, they went to New York and they had different projects and so on and so forth, is that they have solo projects as well. Jim Cuddy band, Greg Keeler's got a killer new record out right now with his solo band. And I've been in a number of bands over the years, my high school band, my college band and whatnot, that we've had multiple songwriters. And it's, you know, there's always a competitiveness and there's always a challenge. I was in one that's on hiatus, which was really my most, I think, commercially, quote unquote, successful band, Silver Teeth, where my partner, Gabriella Rossi, she wrote songs that were very different than me. But we found a way to coexist and create a space that was definitively Silver Teeth. And now we're both doing solo records, and I think that's super healthy and it's great. And I think we probably will play again. Silver Teeth, I think we'll be back at some point. And if it's one of those things that either works or it doesn't, and there's not much worse than going to see a band with multiple writers when one of the writers, the primary writer, has a great thing going that the crowd is into, everyone's singing along, and then it's like, okay, now it's the drummer's turn. He's got his song. We're going to do that now. And, you know, and you go, oh, geez. In fact, the Jayhawks have that kind of weakness, I think, where if it's not in the modern iteration, if it's not Gary Loris, the primary writer, you know, there's a big drop off there. And there's a band based out of Rhode Island that has a similar thing where it's like, oh, okay, now the drummer's doing his song. Okay, there's a huge drop off there. And if it works, it works great. If it doesn't, it's very uncomfortable to listen to.
Yeah, that's very true. Of course, there's that very cruel musician drummer joke, which is like, what's the last thing the drummer said to the band? I have a song.
Yeah, see you later. That's dangerous.
But I've actually worked with some fantastic drummers, so that's not always true. So let's talk about Lonely One. What was the process on this song?
I wrote that song not this past summer, but the summer beforehand. And I was kind of living on my own, and it was sort of just about my partner and for them. And it just kind of came in one burst. And it was a magical writing experience because of that. And the song, the title Lonely One, was actually written on a painting that this person made. So there's one of those scenarios where I didn't write the song based on the title. I didn't say, okay, Lonely One, even the spelling, lonely, the number one. I didn't say, oh, I want to write that song. It's just, it was ingrained in me. I saw it, I thought about it, and then it came out in the creation of this piece of music, which of course I polished over a year or so. And I chose that song to send to you guys, number one, because I really do like it. And I think that there's there's an element of it that isn't much, I haven't done something in that vein that I've been that excited about in terms of like a Beatles-y type of song. I don't know how else to describe it. That's really not what I mean. I don't think it's at the level of the Beatles, but you know what I'm saying? It's just in that vein.
It certainly had elements of it, I thought.
It definitely, I appreciate because it kind of comes from that place of music. But what was really interesting about that song was when I recorded this last record all by myself here in my loft space in Providence. I played all the instruments. I did Pro Tools myself, mixed it, all that. And I had just about wrapped the record. And of course, my computer crashed. And
oh, no.
Luckily, the Apple Store, after like 2 weeks of really not freaking out, I actually was pretty proud of the way I handled it. I tried to like stay calm and in fact, in my head, I was like, okay, if this doesn't work out, if I lost the record, I'm just going to book a studio. And this was the demo session. And now I'm super prepared to go into the studio. But I was able to get every song back except for Lonely One. And I was so discouraged because I loved the way that Lonely One was coming out on this record. I love the vocal take. It was like, it just worked, And my roommate here at this loft space, an awesome songwriter named Randy Robbins, he said, I think he can do it better. I was like, I don't know. There's something magical about that take that's now gone forever. I might just not use the song. And he was like, try it. And so it was a hot weekend. I can't have the AC on in this big warehouse space because I'm recording. And I remember being drenched in sweat. And finally, on Sunday night, I set the goal. If I don't have this finished by Sunday night, I'm just going to move the song, scrap the song, do it another time. And I said, all right, I think I have it. I printed it. I drove to this coastal location that I love, Black Point Rocks in Narragansett, Rhode Island, a spectacular place, like being on the moon or something. And I went down there and I listened to it on my iPhone. And I said, you know what? I actually like it better than the original version. So that's why I chose it, because it was such an example of, the song, just when you think you have it finished, it's not finished. And yet I still was able to release it.
So what kind of editing and polishing did you do to the song? Because it's quite short. It's like 2 minutes, 38 seconds. Yeah,
definitely. As over the course of the year, or I guess in that case would have been about 8 months since it was birthed in a creative moment to the actual recording, playing it live here and there and playing it back to myself off of voice memos. I just drop things down, and the turns of phrase, it all just kind of gets naturally over time, like a sculpture. It just kind of you just kind of figure out where it is, what it's going to be. And then finalizing lyrics is also something that just kind of organically happens with that. I played it live enough times, had enough examples of it recorded on my iPhone that I could listen back and say, oh, I love the way this sounds. I don't know what the lyric is, but let me see what phonetically fits there that also lyrically makes sense. Once a song is ready to go in my mind, I usually put it into Pro Tools and then play all the instruments, start singing the vocals. And oftentimes I'll say, yeah, that bridge needs to get changed, or that outro is too long, or whatever the case may be. Usually I won't edit it in Pro Tools. I'll just re-record it. I find that if I over edit recordings, then it's very obvious. And I'll take out a line here and there and cut maybe there's a transition that's 2 bars that I'll make 1, but I'm not much of a producer in the sense of where I'll go in and work in beats and bars. And, it's more like, I just want to imagine that it's a tape machine, even though it's a computer, and get a performance on each instrument. And then if it needs to get changed, just do it over again.
That's a great way of approaching it, actually. So let's take a listen to it. And you do something interesting vocally with one of the words. So listeners, listen for that, and we'll talk about it when we get back. Here we go.
She's a girl, loves this world, so I turn in the valley head
Very cool. Only one by Bill Bartholomew. So the thing that really stood out to me, well, for one thing, there's no fat on that song. That is like the purest rendition of the song, and it's great because it doesn't feel short, like it doesn't feel truncated, but it's there's not a lot of knees bent advancing behavior, as they say. But it was a really interesting technique, and I think it's a wonderful little hook. And I don't know if you intended it to be this. That, so I guess it's the end of the chorus, da-da-da, like that.
Mm-hmm.
That phrase, like that, is a very unsongwritery kind of phrase. Most people wouldn't say that because that is it's a short song. It's a short word. It ends in a hard T.
Mm-hmm.
But and at first it's almost a little jarring, but it really sticks out and it becomes this hook at the end of that line. And it's so effective. I don't know if that was on purpose or.
Yeah, it's an interesting line because it also is, what is the that? Because I don't even necessarily set it up. I say in the valley, whatever in the valley, like that. Like, what do you mean? Like what? So it's really open-ended lyrically. I love, and this comes maybe from the broadcast side, but I love the way that T's sound, or if they're, because like you said, they can be a little jarring, but in terms of a technique, it really is it was organic. But I understand exactly what you're saying because there's a way that it serves as an extra little hook. It's a little bonus hook in a sense. And like you said, it could be off-putting, but it also it's memorable. And some people would read that lyric written out or the entire song lyric and say, what is he talking about?
Yeah.
He's lost in his own little world, I guess. Which to me, in that instance, is kind of fine because I want to invite you into that world as much as I can. And I want to go into as many other artists' worlds as I can as well. So I think there's all of those things are factors in that song. And then also, like, I think the biggest thing is like phonetically, I'm sure if I listen back to the earliest iterations of the voice memos of that song, I probably said like that. That was probably one of the first. And working backwards, I might have at one point thought, well, I'll explain what that is earlier in the verse. But then other things came along and it just never came about. So that's probably the backstory on that. And then it is truncated. It is short. And I'm pretty sure that's kind of how it always was. I don't think it ever really there was definitely no solo or intro or anything like that. There's always the possibility that there was another verse, verse 1, verse 2, then chorus, but sometimes they just come out kind of like in an ideal sense of time frame, And
it's also a good idea to, sometimes it's easy to think that you have to fill out a song, and you don't necessarily have to. Be a much better solution. I just want to talk one more thing about that, and it's just because it's an unusual technique, and I can see people kind of going, oh, I'm not going to go that because it's, they go for a longer word. But the fact that there's that, it adds this rest to this very sort of long lyrical lines, that it kind of gives you this little rest that kind of gives you a little bit of a space. And that's really, really an effective tool. Because I think it could get a little bit samey if the whole thing was just lyrically all the way through.
It's a lot of lyrics. It's a lot of abstract lyric, and, I'm an X so complex, that right there is like, what is X, and if you look at the lyric sheet, it's the letter X, some people might go EX, it's a song about a girl. It's actually X. So now is it an X factor? Is it a gender thing? Is it something else? Is it what's going on here? And so you're right. The space is a nice reset, and it's something that I think is really important. And maybe again, I've learned from doing talk radio and podcasting is the pause. The great talkers, they know when to not say anything. It's the same in sportscast. A great, football game or hockey game or whatever it may be, the great play happens, and the instinct might be to fill it up with as much, oh my God, blah, 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 blah. But sometimes it's just like silence, nothing, 5 seconds, 10 seconds. Those are the sportscasts that I go back sometimes and watch on YouTube at 2 a.m. and just like have my breath taken away, even though I've seen them 4 or 5 or 10 times. Is like, space is important. The imagination is important. Everyone is going to who receives a song or a piece of content is going to have a different relationship with it. So why not give them as much time to formulate that relationship as possible?
Yeah, that's a great idea. And the last chord is really cool. What is that last chord?
So I just go to an E major 7, although I'm capable, it's not E major. This is my musical, my songwriter, not musician brain. It's like capo 7, E major 7. So the song is basically, it's just a G, E major, A minor, D, A minor, D. So closing out the song on that, with the E major 7 really open and stacking. I kind of laugh there at those harmonies, because it's like, all right, because we made that comment about Beatles. It's like, all right, there's Beatles 101. Just stack those harmonies like that. But also Elliott Smith, who was basically Beatles 101. A lot of really songwritery artists will benefit from, or anybody who I think is trying to figure out how to end a song. Sometimes like find the most awkward chord in the song and just end it with that, and then stack harmonies on it, and it'll create a really compelling, almost like jazz hands, like, ta-da, we're out of here.
Yeah, no, it's really, really effective. And it's, would this be a hard song to pull off live?
Well, I actually haven't played it as often live now. It is. Yeah, actually it is. It's actually a hard song to create the softness with. It has to be the right setting for me to play that song. Just like there's songs where it has to be the right setting for me to, the more electric, full stuff. I'm not going to blab. I've learned, and I don't want to take people's heads off. If I'm in a smaller space with a smaller crowd, I'll probably play that song. If I'm in a bigger space, especially one that's not like a theater scenario, like that's like a club where people are going to, I'm not going to be able to get quiet enough to bring that crowd into me. So yeah, it's a hard song. Those types of songs in general are hard to play live in the scenarios where other types of songs tend to work. So that's why I like to have the flexibility of, here's the core set. And then based on whatever scenario there is, even audibles during a show, because we'll be like, this place is rowdy. We don't need to play either that song, Lonely One, or a song that's in that vein. Let's just do another up-tempo song or keep jamming or whatever the case may be.
Right. Now, what are you doing to get this song out? Because lots of people are writing songs and recording, but they want to get it out in front of people. What are you doing to get it out in front of people?
Such a drag, when you really think about it. It's it's on Spotify, it's on TikTok and all that stuff, playing live. Certainly have gotten some local and regional press, some college radio in the Northeast US. To me, it's just always been about the hustle, one listener at a time. That's been the story of my whole artistic career, is hustle. And sometimes I've gotten a little break. Many times it's just been grinded out. I'm trying to do as much. Like, I love this show and I love that we're doing this today. This is very satisfying. And it's something like this is just a perfect way to get a song out there. I'm not spending money on any, playlist nonsense, or let's have bots in, Eastern Europe,
Right.
go through and doctor YouTube and all that. And people are doing that.
Yeah.
And, what I see is I go, oh, okay, you have 100,000 streams on Spotify and you're playing next Friday night in your hometown. I'll show up at that show. And if there's 15 people there, I'm pretty much guaranteeing that those numbers aren't authentic in terms of total streams, you know what I mean? Or it's hard to believe that they would be, but it's some ideas I have are to keep making videos, both sitting in front of my phone, I'll film nature, I'll film the different B-roll things, put those little clips up on TikTok and push it out there. And just, again, that hustle of playing solo, playing with my band, playing in New York, playing in Providence, playing around New England, trying to, I applied for South by Southwest. I don't know if I'll get in this year or not, going to Nashville, and that's it, because one thing that I've learned, and it's been in more so in my radio and TV and podcasting side, is that if you keep doing the work, and it's true in music too, but specifically if you keep doing the work and you keep creating the content and you just work hard, give it everything you can, and you meet the right person who's the right ambassador between you and a larger platform, that's the trick. And I just keep grinding out on the music side. And I've had these encounters where I've gotten opportunities because of that one person that says, oh, I know this person at MTV and they're looking for a song that's just like that. Can you come in and present that song? Sure. One random person, you could mail out 1 million CDs. You could get 10 million plays on Spotify, and I wouldn't have met that person and I wouldn't have gotten that opportunity. So it's just, to me, that's always been the mentality. Just grind it out. I know that I'm realistic about what this post-COVID, it's not even post-COVID because we're still in it, but the sort of post-onset of COVID change in the music business is. And that means that I've been in a band where you get in the van and you're sleeping on a floor in Buffalo after playing in front of 100 people. And then the next night you're in Ithaca, New York, and you're sleeping in the van and you just played in front of 5 people. And by the way, you've got to pay rent and you've got to eat. And I've done that thing. And it was a lot of fun. And it was also, it got to a point where it was like, this isn't even art anymore. So being in an indie band, traveling around and all that, I don't know that that's even really, between my own sort of having done that thing and then also in this post onset of COVID world, I'm not sure that that's the right thing to do either. What's the value of going to play in Memphis or Kitchener, Ontario for 4 people, versus being here and writing another song tomorrow night and keep pushing your own or my own or anybody's own creative chops and being prepared for that moment will come where you'll encounter somebody who can say, I'll help you advance this, but be ready for them. And no one's going to save you. That's the other thing I've learned. No one's coming along to say, oh, great, come with me for this ride. This is, we're going to get this song on every radio station in the world and you're going to be a star, kid. Like, yeah. I mean, so it's like, so that's not an option, or it shouldn't be. And so maybe don't think that way. Don't obsess over that. Don't measure success by that. Measure success by the encounters that you have one-on-one. And if your music or your art impacts them, or your show in your case, and your music in your case, and, it's that one-on-one impact is ultimately what's going to make a difference in the bigger sense anyway. So just give it 100% there.
Yeah, that's some great stuff. Do you think being close to New York helps?
Yeah, I think so. Energy-wise, I think it's, people say the internet has made the big cities irrelevant. I don't think that's true. I think there's an energy in New York there's a competitiveness. It's just a numbers game. I'm going to see some great songs here in Rhode Island by other songwriters, I'm probably going to see a lot more great songs if I go to an open mic or I have a show in New York, because there's just more people writing more songs, and it's going to be more inspiring, and you're going to get more broad creativity writ large.
That's true. Nothing beats good old-fashioned networking, you know?
Bingo.
Well, I think I hear the band, and I think that means that's all the time we have here on Song Talk Radio. Bill, thanks so much. This has been awesome. Bill,
Thanks, Phil. I really appreciate
where can people go to get more of your good stuff?
On social media, Twitter, Instagram, all that stuff, Bill Bartholomew, Spotify, Bandcamp, just search for me, Bill Bartholomew, and my podcast is Bartholomew Town, and you can find that also on those same platforms.
And how do you spell the last name?
Sure, it's Bartholom, as in Matthew, EW.
Awesome. Well, out there in podcast land, don't forget, we'd love to hear from you, so you can, on any subject. So send us an email at feedback@songtalk.ca, and you can find the links to all the products, books, and whatnot that we talk about here on the show on the resources page. And why not join us for the next Song Talk Radio Songwriters Meetup? It's on Zoom, you know. It's where you can network with other songwriters and get insightful feedback on your works in progress. Free to join and free to attend. Stop by the website at songtalk.ca for the link and the info. You can get more of Neil at neilmodi.com, even though he's not here. And if you want more of me, you can go to philemery.ca. And stop by the website at songtalk.ca, browse past shows, and find out how you could be a guest on the very next show. Thanks for listening, everyone, and we'll see you next time. Good night.